next up, we have Amanda Zafiris, who is Regional Head of Marketing and Diversity Lead for WeWork. And she is going to do a presentation called D&I, Do or Die. Over to Amanda.
Thank you. As this slide suggests, I'm going to be talking about diversity and inclusion. A, because it's very important to me, but B, because I think it's a really timely conversation to have just after the events of this year, seeing the world be more divided than ever before. And most importantly, knowing that a lot of businesses are really struggling to protect their bottom line at the moment and thinking about readjusting their strategic priorities in the wake of COVID. So I think there's a big risk that diversity and inclusion strategies will fall off that strategic priority list. So this is really a prompt for everyone listening to just keep thinking about it, keep it top of mind, especially because as marketers, I think we have a lot of really important roles to play in this space. So just to kick off, wanted to share an overview of a few kind of themes that we've seen over the years in marketing. And I think the combination of all of these just speaks to the fact that diversity and inclusion is a really important priority to maintain within advertising. One, because obviously we saw this massive trend around personalization at scale and really speaking to consumers at an individual level and addressing the individual with the Share a Coke campaign and all of the great programmatic work that came after that. Two, because we've obviously seen this massive spike in brands thinking about how they can be more purposeful in their communications. And I think the best in class example here is when Nike stood by Colin Kaepernick in his fight against police brutality. And, they would really use their platform to make sure that they spread that message far and wide. And I think that was widely celebrated. And then the third one, this might be a trend that we're just seeing in the B2B space, but what we're seeing in our advertising at WeWork is that there's this real kind of shift towards our customers or our audiences looking to us for advice as to how they should manage their people, particularly amidst this crisis, just thinking about, leadership, leading dispersed teams and all of the challenges that come with working from home for business leaders. And this treatment that you see here is something that Vayner actually presented to us. We're testing their Vayner Volume model at the moment, which is their dynamic creative production tool, which gives you a really quick read on media performance in real time. And this was all about us being able to tick the box of office space so that you can think about your teams. And it performed really well in the way that a lot of people-focused creative that we've been running over the past few weeks has. So I think this speaks to a wider trend that A, as the industry's already acknowledged, people do want to be spoken to at an individual level. But B, our customers are looking to us for advice as to how to treat each other, and are looking to us to try and inspire the zeitgeist and to shape culture. And I think it's really important that we don't neglect that responsibility. And not just from an advertising perspective, I think if we just look at the total marketing picture, so for people who are in marketing roles, there are so many ways that we can influence not just our advertising strategies, but influence the wider business and how we operate in a more inclusive way. So there are some examples here. I'm sure there are many others, but firstly, we should be really playing an important role in structuring our employer brand communications and making sure that businesses show up as inclusive and welcoming of all different types of people. But we also have a role in terms of defining and shaping the company's value and mission and articulating that back to the business. And again, that's an opportunity for us to inform a more inclusive environment. Obviously, as leaders, we have a responsibility for inclusive and diverse hiring and just being really rigorous and removing any bias from our hiring processes. Events, whether those be marketing-led or not, but we have a responsibility to make sure they're accessible to all and communicated in a way that is fair. Obviously, from a content perspective, there's consideration needs to be paid for the way that we show up on our website and our social media platforms. For all organic content that is shared on those channels. And even from a product perspective, as marketers, I think, particularly in tech organizations, we have a role to funnel audience insights to inform product development. And there's a way that we can do that to ensure that products are developed with inclusivity in mind as well. Obviously, from a creative perspective, the opportunity is huge, and from a targeting perspective too. And I think this is where agencies can play a really meaningful role here. Just having worked at MediaCom myself, I know that this is really ingrained in the way that planners are trained. Everyone is trained to automatically think about inclusive communications when they receive a brief from a client. But also we're seeing departments, like a friend of mine runs a department at Omnicom, which is dedicated to diversity and inclusion briefs and making sure that those are delivered in the most authentic way. And where I've seen this come together really nicely was internally during the course of October, we worked with what we call one of our ECGs. So that's an employer community group. We've got a range of these across the business. So we have one for We of Colour, one for Pride of We, one for Parents of We, and there are a few others. So what we did for Black History Month was we partnered with the We of Colour team, and we aligned with them as to how we wanted to show up with as a business in celebrating Black History Month. And this came to life in a few different ways. So as you can see here, we produced this content which was designed to educate both our employees and also our members on Black History Month, what it means, what the important markers were in Black history, but also to celebrate the heroes within that community. And then as you can see here, there's also examples of employees just talking about what the event means to them and how they feel about it. So this content was promoted across our building screens, was promoted on our social media channels. And the reason I wanted to show this is because I think this is a really good example of where when you have diversity and inclusion kind of sitting at the core of your brand and when it's genuinely an important focus for your business, there's an opportunity to really deliver authentic communications around some of these initiatives. And we've done that by just, working with the people who work with us, with our colleagues, to make sure we're showing up in an authentic way. But obviously the list goes beyond race. Black History Month was an amazing celebration, which we plan to scale and expand into different audience groups. But there are so many other considerations, like the ones I have listed on the side of this slide. So, thinking about age, thinking about faith, thinking about how introverts want to be communicated to versus extroverts. There are so many considerations. And there are loads of brands that have done this really well. I've got a couple of examples on the slides, like I think the Microsoft campaign that really spoke to disability and produced some really inclusive comms around their gaming products was a great example. Obviously, P&G, the talk for race relations, was an amazing example. Bumble showcasing the breadth of their customers and really celebrating diversity within their audiences. And Snickers, the activation that we ran around Gay Pride, which wasn't my idea, but I was involved in it, so I'm allowed to celebrate it. And I see I'm at time now, so I'll leave you with a picture of a water cooler, because I know everybody's missing being in the office.
Amanda, thank you so much for a brilliant conversation. And it's good to talk to you again. So one of the things I'm really interested to know is how do businesses make sure that diversity and inclusion isn't just at the bottom or in the middle or even the top of a tick list? How do you really make sure that it's coming from a place of authenticity and love, as opposed to it being from a place where people think they're going to be called out? What do you want to see from businesses, not how they conduct themselves externally, but internally moving forward in 2021?
I think the main thing is just to not default to relying on HR for evolving your business's diversity and inclusion tactics. I think that seems to be really common, but it's really important that it's built into everyone's KPIs. Like, all of your leaders should be thinking about diversity and inclusion and should have it as part of their development plans for all of those reasons that I've covered. Thinking about hiring, thinking about mentorship, thinking about promotions and how you nurture talent within your team. So I think it's one, just holding people to account for building a more inclusive culture. And two, and I think engaging leadership is a really big part of that. Otherwise it is going to fall by the wayside, but it's really important to have that conversation at a leadership level.
So I spend a lot of time looking at adverts with other advertisers, as you know, and one thing that we're seeing a trend of is a lot more inclusivity in advertising, which is fantastic. But sometimes brands are being criticised by the industry for just doing it for doing its sake, as opposed to doing it from like an authentic place. What are those checklists that brands need to put in place at a creative level to make sure that the ideas that are going out are inclusive in the right way and not just in a tokenistic sense?
Well, I think that's where, and I know not every business has this luxury, but it's becoming more and more popular, this idea of having employee committees and different groups for different audiences and organizations. But I think that's where partnering with your colleagues and people who will, be frank with you and hold you to account in terms of giving you feedback on whether or not your comms are authentic is such an easy win there. So for anyone who does have an opportunity to influence the existence of those groups, I would say definitely go ahead and suggest that to your HR leaders or to, whatever stakeholders would manage that process. But just having those groups who can give you just real-time feedback and can be honest with you, which I think is the main thing.
Amanda, so many great lessons there. Thanks so much for your presentation.